In the heart of the city, life had slowly returned to normal. The devastation caused by the initial wave of the zombie outbreak was now a distant memory, and humans had begun to rebuild. But despite the outward calm, there was an undercurrent of tension. Survivors, weary from the past, kept their eyes on the horizon, knowing the peace they had worked so hard for was fragile. Among them was Sergeant Ethan Wright, a leader in the resistance against the undead, stationed at a fortified outpost on the city's edge. Despite his experiences and the countless battles he had fought, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt too still, the silence too deep. The survivors had been warned, there would be no safe haven in this world anymore. One morning, a scout team arrived at the outpost with unsettling news. A massive, coordinated swarm of zombies had been spotted miles away, heading straight for their city. The news spread quickly, sending waves of unease through the survivor community. There was no time to waste. If this was anything like the previous swarms, it would not be a simple raid, it would be an all-out assault that could overwhelm everything in its path. Ethan and his team sprang into action, calling for reinforcements from neighboring safe zones and preparing the outpost's defenses. They knew that this was going to be the fight of their lives, but what they didn't know was how different this swarm was going to be. The usual mindless hordes were dangerous enough, but there were rumors now, whispers of zombies that had evolved, that were more strategic, more cunning than the ones they had faced before. The survivors had no choice but to prepare for the worst. Ethan reviewed the intel, the reports from the scout team. They spoke of zombies moving in unison, not just scattering in random directions like before. The patterns were unmistakable, they were being led. A coordinated attack, as if they were being controlled. The first few hours were spent fortifying barricades, setting traps, and preparing weapons. Ethan's second-in-command, Captain Lena Richards, a no-nonsense officer with years of combat experience, organized the survivors into defense units. Everyone had a role to play, some were tasked with holding the perimeter, others with manning the weapon stations. But the unease lingered. It wasn't the usual chaos of an incoming attack, it felt like something bigger was coming, something they weren't fully prepared for. Ethan took a moment to stand outside, overlooking the horizon. He had always prided himself on his ability to read the battlefield, but this was different. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the landscape, and for a brief moment, it almost seemed peaceful. But he knew better. The calm before the storm was always the most dangerous. As night fell, the first sign of the swarm appeared. At first, it was just a few zombies in the distance, shambling aimlessly toward the city. But soon, more and more appeared, out of the shadows, from behind buildings, emerging from the forest at the city's edge. The zombies weren't alone. They were moving together, as if with purpose. Ethan's heart raced. The time for questions was over. "Get ready," he shouted to his team. The defenders were in position, weapons drawn, and the barricades were fortified. But even as they prepared, Ethan couldn't help but feel that there was something about this swarm that was different. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a fight for their very existence. The first wave hit the outer barricades with a force that rattled the ground. The survivors fired, their shots echoing into the night. The zombies, relentless and numerous, pressed forward, crashing against the defenses. The battle had begun. But as the survivors fought back, they quickly realized that these were no ordinary zombies. They moved in an almost coordinated fashion, working together to breach the barricades. They didn't stumble or mindlessly shuffle forward. No, these zombies were organized, as if they had learned how to work together, like they were being controlled. Ethan's mind raced. Could it be true? Were the zombies evolving? Could they be adapting to their methods of survival? Before he could process the implications, a loud crash echoed through the air, and the first barricade gave way. The swarm was breaking through. The survivors would have to rely on everything they had learned, and everything they could fight for, if they were going to survive. To be continued. The barricade had collapsed with a terrifying roar. The swarm surged forward, pouring into the streets like a flood of relentless, mindless hunger. The survivors scrambled to regroup, trying to hold their ground in the face of the ever-growing tide of undead. The sound of gunfire filled the air, a constant backdrop to the chaos that had descended upon them. Ethan, standing at the front of the outpost, barked orders to his team, his voice cutting through the panic. "Focus on the weak points. Don't let them spread through the gaps." His words were drowned out by the deafening roar of the swarm, but the survivors were well trained, and they followed his commands with precision. Captain Lena Richards was at his side, firing her rifle into the nearest group of zombies, her eyes scanning the field for any signs of weakness. "They're not stopping, Ethan. This isn't like the last time," she shouted over the noise. Ethan nodded grimly. He could feel the difference too. The usual chaos of the undead was now replaced by something far more organized, far more threatening. The zombies weren't just coming in waves, they were coming in force, pushing forward with unnerving speed and coordination. It was as if they were learning, adapting with each passing moment. "Set up the traps," Ethan ordered, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure. The survivors had planted several makeshift traps along the city's perimeter, hoping to slow down the swarm. But even as the first explosions rang out, sending several zombies flying into the air, Ethan could see the swarm adapt. They didn't hesitate. They simply moved around the traps, as if they understood the danger. The realization hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. These weren't just mindless creatures anymore. They were evolving, thinking, and adapting in ways that no one had anticipated. He turned to Lena. "We need to find their leader." Lena's face darkened. "You think there's someone behind this? Someone controlling them?" Ethan's eyes narrowed as he scanned the growing swarm. There had to be. The way they were coordinated, moving with such precision, it couldn't be a coincidence. But where were they? Who was behind this? And what did they want? As the battle raged on, the survivors began to fall back to the main outpost. The zombies were relentless, and though they fought bravely, it was clear that they were losing ground. One by one, the perimeter walls began to crumble under the pressure of the swarm. The survivors had no choice but to retreat further into the city, where they could regroup and plan their next move. Ethan's mind raced. He had to come up with something, anything, that could turn the tide. They couldn't afford to keep fighting like this, they were outnumbered, and the zombies were too organized. They needed a strategy, a way to stop the Horde before it overwhelmed them completely. As they retreated, the survivors reached a small, fortified building on the edge of the city. It was one of the last remaining safe zones. Inside, the survivors quickly barricaded the doors and windows, taking a brief moment to catch their breath. But Ethan couldn't relax. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. "We need a plan," Ethan said, his voice low but determined. "We can't keep retreating like this. The swarm is too much." Lena looked at him, her expression grim. "We're not retreating, Ethan. We're surviving." But Ethan wasn't so sure. Survival wasn't enough anymore. They had to fight back, and they had to find a way to do it before it was too late. He paced back and forth, his mind working furiously. The key to winning this battle wasn't just in brute force, it was in understanding the enemy. The zombies had evolved, and if they could figure out why, they might have a chance to stop them. The sound of pounding at the door jolted Ethan from his thoughts. The swarm had found them. The survivors rushed to their positions, ready to fight, but Ethan knew deep down that this wasn't just another wave of zombies. It was the beginning of something much bigger. "We need to take them down at their source," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to find out who's leading this swarm." Lena nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We go after the source. We end this tonight." But even as the survivors prepared for their next move, the relentless swarm continued to press in from all sides. Time was running out, and Ethan knew that the clock was ticking. They had no more time to waste. The ultimate clash between humans and zombies was about to begin, and only one side would walk away victorious. To be continued. The night stretched on like an endless battlefield. The survivors, holed up inside their last line of defense, had no illusions left. The zombies were not merely a threat, they were a meticulously orchestrated force, pushing harder, with a purpose. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the swarm was being led by something far more intelligent than any creature he had ever faced. "All right, here's the plan," Ethan said, gathering his closest team members around a map of the city. The survivors had fortified their position, but it was clear that without a drastic shift, they would eventually be overrun. "We need to get to the heart of the swarm. If we can find its leader, whoever is controlling them, we might have a chance." Lena Richards, her face grim, looked at him. "You think we can find the leader? What if it's not a person? What if it's something else entirely?" Ethan met her gaze. "It's our only shot. We're fighting an enemy that's evolving faster than we can adapt. If we don't take this opportunity, we'll never get another one." The group fell silent, understanding the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a desperate bid to understand their enemy and hopefully put an end to the threat once and for all. They suited up and prepared for the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. Ethan led the way, a mixture of caution and determination in his eyes. Every step they took felt heavier than the last, the weight of the impending battle bearing down on them. They moved through the darkened streets, weapons drawn, every shadow a potential threat. The streets were eerily quiet for the moment, the sound of the swarm just a distant murmur. But Ethan knew that the silence was deceptive. The zombies were out there, watching, waiting. They were coordinated, strategic, waiting for them to make a mistake. As they neared the center of the city, the air grew thick with tension. Ethan's heart raced. There, in the distance, he saw it, a massive group of zombies, more than he had ever seen in one place. And in the middle of the horde, something was moving differently. Something that made Ethan's blood run cold. Through the mist and shadows, the figure emerged. It wasn't a typical zombie. This creature was taller, its movements more deliberate, more controlled. Its eyes glowed faintly with an eerie light, and it seemed to be directing the swarm, raising its arms to signal the others. The realization hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the leader." The survivors froze, staring at the creature in disbelief. This wasn't just a mindless, reanimated corpse. It was something different, something far worse. The leader was not only directing the swarm, but it was doing so with intelligence, with purpose. It was orchestrating the chaos, leading the zombies in a way that no one could have imagined. Ethan's mind raced. "We have to take it out. If we kill the leader, the swarm might lose its direction, its coordination." Lena nodded, her expression hardening. "We go for the kill. Fast and clean. No mistakes." The team moved forward, inching closer to the leader's position. They stayed in the shadows, careful not to alert the zombies. But the closer they got, the more Ethan realized something terrifying: the leader wasn't alone. There were other figures, shadows that seemed to be moving in unison with the leader. They were watching, observing, waiting. It was then that Ethan understood the full scope of the danger. The leader wasn't just directing the swarm, it was teaching them. There was a new level of intelligence at play here. These zombies were evolving, not just physically, but mentally. They were learning, adapting, and soon they would become an unstoppable force. A sudden noise shattered the silence. One of the survivors stepped on a twig. The leader's head snapped toward them, its eyes locking onto Ethan's. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The leader raised its hand, and the zombies surrounding it froze in place, as if awaiting a command. Ethan's heart pounded. This was their moment. They had to act, and fast. "Now," he yelled, signaling the team to open fire. The survivors unleashed a volley of gunfire, their weapons tearing through the air. The leader staggered back, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out an inhuman screech, a sound that sent chills down Ethan's spine. It was a rallying cry. The swarm surged forward, swarming the survivors with terrifying speed. In the chaos, Ethan pushed forward, his eyes locked on the leader. He couldn't let it escape. If the leader lived, the swarm would never stop. With a surge of adrenaline, he charged, his rifle raised, ready to strike. The fight was brutal. Zombies lunged from all directions, their bodies twisted and grotesque. But Ethan and his team were determined. They fought their way through the horde, pushing toward the leader with a singular goal in mind, to take it down and end this madness. As they reached the leader, Ethan swung his rifle, aiming for the creature's head. But just as he was about to pull the trigger, the leader's eyes flashed with an unnatural, calculating intelligence. And then, it spoke. To be continued. The words that escaped the leader's lips were not the growls or moans of the usual undead. They were clear, deliberate, cold and calculated. Ethan froze, his rifle raised but his finger no longer on the trigger. The sound of battle seemed to fade into the background as the leader's voice echoed through the chaos. "You think killing me will stop this?" The voice was deep, almost metallic, as though it came from somewhere beyond the grave, human, yet not. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a creature. It was something else entirely. The realization hit him hard, this wasn't the mindless undead. This was something orchestrated, something intelligent, and perhaps, something even human. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. He'd faced countless zombies, fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground. But this? This was something different. He wasn't just facing a monster. He was facing an enemy that knew how to manipulate, how to think. Lena, her face twisted in anger and confusion, was the first to react. Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. "What are you?" The leader let out a chilling laugh, a sound that sent a ripple of unease through the group. "I am the culmination of your worst fears. I am the evolution of mankind's mistake. But you are my test subjects." Ethan's mind raced, trying to process what the leader was saying. Test subjects? What did that mean? How is this possible? You're not just some infected mind," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming realization. "You've been controlling them. The swarm, it's you. You're leading them." The leader's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the darkness. "I didn't lead them," it said. "I guided them. And now, they are beyond your control. They are evolving, growing stronger, and they will tear down everything you've built. Your resistance is futile." Ethan took a step forward, tightening his grip on his rifle. "You're wrong. We're not going to give up. We're not just going to roll over and let you destroy everything we've worked for. We'll stop you." The leader cocked its head, as though considering Ethan's words. "You think you can stop this? You've seen it with your own eyes. You've felt the swarm's power. And yet, you continue to fight. What do you think you can achieve by fighting?" Ethan wasn't sure how to answer. The swarm had already overwhelmed their outer defenses, pushed them to the brink. It was clear the leader wasn't just a zombie, this thing had purpose, had plans. It wasn't driven by hunger or the mindless need to destroy. No, it was something far more dangerous, a being that understood strategy, manipulation, and control. A sound from behind them broke the tension. The swarm, in its coordinated march, was moving in closer. Zombies filled the streets, their grotesque forms lurching toward the survivors, but they hesitated, almost waiting for the leader's command. "You're too late," the leader said, its voice taking on a sinister edge. "The swarm is only the beginning. I have more plans than you can even begin to comprehend." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about? What's your endgame?" The leader's smile was chilling, a twisted reflection of something that had once been human. "The world you fought for is already gone. But I will bring it into the new age. A world where the living no longer have the power, where evolution will continue without the weaknesses of humanity. You are nothing but remnants, clinging to a past that no longer exists." Lena stepped forward, defiance in her eyes. "We're not remnants. We're survivors. And we're not going to let you win." The leader's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, perhaps. It raised its arm again, and with a single motion, the swarm surged forward. Zombies rushed at them, driven by the leader's unseen command. Ethan's team reacted quickly, opening fire and using the chaos to break through the advancing horde. But even as they fought, Ethan's mind was racing. The leader had spoken of evolution. It had to be more than just the zombies changing, they were being led, controlled by something greater. But what was the true purpose behind this twisted force? The swarm wasn't just a mindless plague. It was a tool, one being wielded by something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The leader's voice rang out again, as if mocking their efforts. Run, little humans. Run as far as you can. The end is inevitable. With the horde closing in, Ethan knew they were running out of time. They had to act, and fast. But as the battle raged around them, one thing became clear: this was no longer just about survival. It was about defeating an intelligence that had the potential to change the very fabric of the world. And the worst part? Ethan had no idea who or what was truly behind it all. The swarm surged forward with terrifying speed, its roar filling the air as it pressed in on all sides. Ethan's team fought with everything they had, their weapons unloading in rapid succession, but the zombies kept coming, relentless, undeterred by the gunfire. Each fallen zombie seemed to be replaced by two more, crawling over the others with a single-minded determination to reach the survivors. Ethan's mind was spinning. The leader had made it clear, this wasn't just about the swarm. It was part of a larger plan, one that was unfolding at an alarming rate. There was something more, something deeper, but Ethan didn't have the time to figure it all out now. The immediate threat was the leader and the swarm, and they were fast running out of options. Lena was beside him, her rifle blazing as she took down wave after wave of zombies. She shot him a quick glance, her expression tense. "Ethan, we need to fall back to the outpost. We can't keep holding them off like this." Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. They had to find the leader's weak spot, something that could give them an edge. The idea hit him like a bolt of lightning. "The leader," he shouted. "We need to get to the leader. If we take it down, the swarm might break." Lena's eyes widened as she processed his words. "You're suggesting we go after it? While we're surrounded by this? We don't have a choice. It's the only way." Lena gritted her teeth. "Then let's do it." The survivors, who had been pushing back against the horde, quickly reorganized as Ethan gave the order. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was their only shot. They couldn't continue this fight indefinitely. If they didn't act now, they would be overrun, and all hope would be lost. With the leader still positioned at the heart of the swarm, Ethan and his team pushed forward, using the chaos to cover their advance. They moved like shadows, ducking behind abandoned vehicles and wreckage, doing their best to avoid drawing attention. The leader seemed oblivious to their movements, focused solely on commanding the swarm. But as they closed the gap, something unexpected happened. The leader's head snapped toward them, its glowing eyes locking onto Ethan's group. The silence that followed was eerie, and for a split second, Ethan thought they had been discovered. But then the leader's lips curled into a smile, a sick, twisted grin that sent a chill racing down Ethan's spine. "You think you can end this with a single strike?" the leader's voice echoed, sending a ripple of unease through the group. It was as though the creature had known their plan all along. Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't stop. This was the moment. They couldn't afford hesitation. They had to end this, now. With a battle cry, Ethan and his team surged forward, guns blazing as they cut through the approaching zombies. The closer they got to the leader, the more intense the swarm became, the zombies pressing in with renewed vigor. It was as though the leader had summoned the full force of its control to stop them. They reached the heart of the swarm, the leader standing in the middle, surrounded by a protective barrier of undead. The creatures stood still, as though waiting for the leader's command to attack. Ethan raised his rifle, aiming for the leader's head. But before he could fire, the leader lifted its hand, and the zombies around it froze. "Do you think this is what it means to win?" the leader said, its voice chilling. "To kill me? You misunderstand. You're too late. The world has already changed. The swarm will never stop. Not while I am here. You will fail." Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The leader wasn't bluffing. This creature, this being, was more than just a puppet master. It was an evolution, a being that had moved beyond what anyone thought possible. The survivors, their weapons trained on the leader, exchanged a look. Time was running out. Ethan knew this wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for control of the future of the world. Lena, ever the strategist, glanced at Ethan, determination in her eyes. We don't need to kill it. We just need to disrupt it. If we can break its control over the swarm, we might stand a chance. Ethan nodded. We take out the source of its power. But just as they prepared to make their move, the leader's eyes narrowed. You think you can disrupt what's already been set in motion? You will never understand the scope of what is happening here. And then, in an instant, the leader's hand shot out, and the zombies surrounding it began to move, not toward the survivors, but toward something else. The ground trembled as massive shapes began to emerge from beneath the earth, giant, hulking figures that had once been human but now twisted into monstrous creatures. The leader's voice rang out, louder than ever. This is only the beginning. The swarm will evolve. We will evolve. A wave of terror washed over Ethan and his team. These weren't just zombies anymore. The leader's control had taken them to a whole new level. The swarm was no longer just an army of the undead, it was a force of nature, ready to reshape the world. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. They hadn't just entered a battle for survival. They had stepped into a war for humanity's future. To be continued. The ground beneath their feet rumbled again, sending a jolt of fear through Ethan and his team. The massive figures emerging from the earth weren't zombies, they were something else entirely. Twisted forms, towering over the survivors, were once human but now barely recognizable. These new creatures were stronger, faster, and more deadly than any zombies they had ever faced. Get back! Ethan shouted, pushing Lena behind him as he opened fire. His rifle shots seemed to have no effect on the towering figures, their skin like thick armor, and their movements far more calculated than the shambling zombies. The massive creatures, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans, let out deep, guttural growls before charging forward. Their monstrous limbs crashed against the ground, sending shockwaves that knocked over nearby debris. We need to stop those things. Lena shouted, her voice edged with panic. But even as she raised her rifle, she knew they were outmatched. The bullets barely dented the new creature's skin. Ethan's heart pounded as he scanned the area. The leader, standing behind the chaos it had orchestrated, was watching them intently, as if this was all part of its plan. There was no way they could fight this without a strategy, a new one. They had to find the weak spot, the chink in the armor, before they were overwhelmed. We fall back. Ethan ordered, realizing they couldn't engage these new beasts head-on. We need to regroup and rethink. Now. The team began to retreat under the cover of gunfire, moving through the wreckage of the city's ruins. The towering creatures slowly followed, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground with every step. But the swarm, despite its ferocity, didn't pursue. It was as though they were being held back by the leader's will. As they reached a nearby alleyway, Ethan paused to catch his breath. His mind raced. These new creatures weren't just mindless zombies. They were more advanced, perhaps even human hybrids. Whatever the leader had done to them had created something terrifying. Ethan, Lena said, her voice trembling. What are we up against? This is worse than anything we've seen. Ethan gripped his rifle tighter, trying to calm his nerves. We're up against something that's not just a zombie apocalypse anymore. It's an evolution. And it's being led by that thing. The leader, it's controlling them. The swarm, the new creatures, it's all a part of a bigger plan. But we can't just stand here. We need to get to the source. Lena's face was pale, but she nodded. And what's the source? The leader? We can't just walk up to it and hope for the best. No, Ethan replied, his thoughts racing. But we know one thing, the leader can control the swarm. If we can disrupt its control, maybe, just maybe, we can stop it from evolving any further. Lena looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. And how do we disrupt it? It's not like we can just walk up to it and shoot it in the head. Ethan took a deep breath. He knew she was right. They needed a plan that didn't rely solely on brute force. The leader wasn't just a mindless zombie, it was intelligent, calculating. They couldn't take it down with simple firepower. We need to find something that disrupts its control over the swarm. Something that interferes with whatever connection it has. If we can do that, we might be able to break the swarm's coordination. Just as he finished speaking, a loud crashing noise echoed through the alley. Ethan turned to see the massive creatures breaking through the debris and entering the narrow space. The survivors had no choice, they had to fight, and they had to fight smart. We need to split up, Ethan said quickly. Lena, take half the team and find anything we can use to disrupt the leader. I'll hold off these things and keep them distracted. Lena didn't hesitate. Be careful, Ethan. Don't do anything reckless. Ethan flashed her a quick grin, though his heart was racing. Wouldn't dream of it. As Lena and the others split off, Ethan took a deep breath and turned to face the advancing creatures. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was their last chance. If they didn't break the leader's control now, it was game over. The first of the creatures charged toward him, its massive fists raised high. Ethan rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow, and fired his rifle at the beast's leg. The bullet ricocheted off its tough skin, but the creature staggered, giving him a moment to regroup. The others were closing in fast, moving with a terrifying speed. Ethan had to keep them distracted long enough for Lena and the team to find a way to disrupt the leader's control. He needed to buy them time. But as the creature turned and swung again, something clicked in his mind. There was a pattern to their attacks. They weren't just mindless beasts, they were following a strategy. The leader was still pulling the strings, even from this distance. Lena, Ethan called through his earpiece, I think I've got it. The creatures, they're reacting to the leader's commands. If we can interfere with its signal, we can disrupt the swarm. But we need to do it fast. The air crackled with tension as Ethan dodged another attack, his mind racing. The stakes had never been higher. The tension in the air was palpable as Ethan evaded another brutal strike from one of the hulking creatures. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. Every movement felt like it was in slow motion. Time was running out. The swarm, although momentarily stilled, was still out there, waiting for the leader's command. The massive creatures were relentless, and if he couldn't find a way to stop them, the survivors would be swallowed whole by this monstrous force. Ethan, we've got something. Lena's voice crackled through his earpiece, her words laced with urgency. We found a power grid in an old building nearby. It looks like it might have been used for communication. If we can overload it, we might be able to disrupt the leader's control over the swarm. But we need to act quickly. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. Lena and her team had found the key. The power grid, if they could disrupt it, it could sever the connection between the leader and its creations. You've got to hurry, Ethan said, his voice tight with adrenaline. I can't keep these things distracted for much longer. He scanned his surroundings, looking for any opportunity to stall the creatures. The leader was still at the heart of the swarm, its eyes glowing with a sickening malice. It had sensed their plan, no doubt, and was ready to stop them at all costs. The massive creatures closed in again, their towering forms casting long, ominous shadows. Ethan was forced to dodge another swing, rolling to his feet with a grunt. His mind was clear now, focused. He had to buy Lena and the team time. He fired at the nearest creature, aiming for its weak points, its joints, its eyes, anything that might slow it down. But the shots seemed to have no effect. The creatures were too strong, too fast. He had to do something else, something smarter. As the beast lunged toward him, Ethan noticed something. The creature was slower in its movements than the others, its right leg dragging. A weak point. Gotcha, he muttered under his breath, quickly calculating his next move. He wasn't going to stop it, but he could at least slow it down long enough to create a diversion. With swift precision, Ethan fired another shot at the creature's exposed leg, this time landing a direct hit to the knee joint. The beast roared in pain, stumbling forward, its massive body crashing into the ground with a deafening thud. The others hesitated for a split second, confused by the sudden shift in their target's movement. That moment of uncertainty was all Ethan needed. He sprinted towards the fallen creature, his rifle raised high. He leapt onto its massive form, finding purchase on its muscular back, and pulled out a knife from his belt. He aimed for its exposed neck, but before he could strike, the creature jerked violently, throwing him off balance. He crashed into the debris, momentarily stunned. Dazed but determined, he scrambled to his feet just as the creature rose, its eyes fixed on him with murderous intent. "You think you can stop us?" the leader's voice echoed again, this time amplified by some unseen force. "The swarm is inevitable. The future is already written." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. His focus was solely on the battle at hand. He needed to stall the creatures, keep them occupied for just a little longer. He couldn't let the leader win. Not after everything they had been through. His earpiece crackled again, Lena's voice breaking through the static. "Ethan, we've got it. The grid's overloaded, now's your chance. Disrupt the leader's control while we can." A rush of relief flooded through Ethan, but it was short-lived. The creatures weren't stopping, they were growing more aggressive. They were still under the leader's control, and without breaking that control, they were trapped in an endless fight. Ethan darted toward the closest creature again, using its temporary confusion to climb onto its back once more. This time, he didn't hesitate. With a powerful strike, he drove his knife into the creature's neck, severing its spinal cord. The beast went limp, collapsing to the ground with a loud thud. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining creatures turned their attention to him, their eyes burning with hatred. They were not just beasts, they were soldiers in the leader's war. "Lena, I need a distraction," Ethan shouted, his voice hoarse as he ducked another swipe from a towering beast. "I'm sending one now," Lena replied. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath their feet. A blinding flash of light erupted from the building where the power grid had been overloaded. The pulse of energy crackled through the air, and for a brief moment, everything stopped. The creatures froze in their tracks, their glowing eyes flickering erratically. Ethan's breath caught in his chest as he saw it, the swarm's control was weakening. The connection between the leader and the creatures was severed, and the beasts staggered, disoriented, and confused. "Now's our chance," Ethan yelled, charging forward with renewed determination. He fired at the remaining creatures, aiming for their heads, their hearts, any weak point he could find. They were still formidable, but without the leader's control, they were no longer unstoppable. The creatures faltered, their movements sluggish and erratic. One by one, they fell as Ethan and his team fought back with all the strength they had left. But the leader wasn't done. From the distance, it watched, its eyes filled with fury and frustration. It wasn't about to let go of its dominance without a fight. Ethan knew that this battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope. They had cracked the leader's hold. Now, it was time to finish this. The air was thick with smoke and the remnants of battle. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stood amidst the wreckage, surveying the fallen creatures around him. The power surge had worked. The control the leader once had over the swarm was broken. But Ethan knew this victory was only temporary. The leader, though weakened, wasn't going to surrender without a fight. "We can't just leave it like this," Lena said, her voice breathless as she sprinted toward him, her team close behind. "It's still out there. The leader, whatever it is, it's not going to stop." Ethan nodded grimly. "You're right. It's just waiting for the right moment to strike again." He glanced at the others. Their exhaustion was written all over their faces, but there was a spark of determination in their eyes. They'd been through too much to back down now. "We need to go after it," Ethan said. "We take the leader down, and we end this once and for all. No more running. No more fighting." Lena hesitated for only a moment before she spoke. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. All of us. Ethan didn't need to say anything in response. The bond between them was unspoken. It was time for the final stand. As they moved through the ruined city, the streets eerily quiet compared to the chaos earlier, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The leader, whatever it was, had to be close, but where? They had no way of knowing its exact location. The team moved cautiously, staying in formation, their weapons at the ready. Ethan couldn't shake the weight of the moment. This was the endgame, and it could all go horribly wrong if they weren't careful. Suddenly, a loud, mechanical roar echoed from the distance, followed by the earth-shaking sound of something enormous crashing through the city. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The leader had made its move. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. Stay close. It's here. The roar grew louder, and then they saw it, a massive, towering silhouette blocking out the sky. The leader stood in front of them, its glowing eyes piercing the smoke-filled horizon. This time, it wasn't alone. A swarm of the smaller, but still terrifying, creatures flanked it. The creatures, once disoriented, had rallied under the leader's command again. But there was something different. The leader was no longer just a controller, it was transforming, changing, its form shifting in unnatural ways. It was mutating into something more powerful, more monstrous. The realization hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. The leader had learned from their disruption. It was evolving to adapt. "We don't have much time," Lena said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "If we don't stop it now, it'll be over for all of us." Ethan nodded, setting his jaw. "We need to hit it with everything we've got. There's no more time for second chances." He took a step forward, leading the charge. The team opened fire, their bullets raining down on the leader and its army. The leader barely flinched as the rounds bounced off its new, reinforced hide. The smaller creatures attacked, but the team held their ground, firing in perfect synchronization. "We need to target its core," Lena yelled, ducking behind a piece of rubble for cover. "That's where its power is coming from." Ethan's eyes darted to the leader's center, where a pulsating, glowing mass of energy seemed to be feeding its transformation. The core. It was the source of its strength, and if they could destroy it, they might have a chance. "We go for the core," Ethan shouted. "On 3. 1, 2. Before he could finish, the leader's eyes flared brighter, and with a shriek that rattled their bones, it unleashed a shockwave that sent the survivors tumbling to the ground. The wave tore through the city, knocking over buildings and sending debris flying in every direction. Ethan struggled to his feet, his vision blurry from the force of the blast. He could hear the others coughing and groaning, but they were alive. "We can't give up now," Ethan shouted, rallying his team. "We need to finish this." Lena was the first to recover, pulling herself up from the rubble. "Ethan's right. We're this close, let's end this." With renewed determination, the group regrouped, moving toward the leader once again. The creature's movements were erratic now, more desperate, as it struggled to maintain its form. The core in its chest was pulsing with power, its light growing stronger by the second. "On 3. Ethan said again, his voice resolute. 1, 2, 3. The team fired in unison, their combined firepower hitting the leader's core in a burst of energy. The core cracked, its glow dimming for a moment before it exploded in a blinding flash. The shockwave sent the creatures sprawling, their bodies falling to the ground like ragdolls. The leader let out one final, deafening scream as its body collapsed, its massive form crumbling into the wreckage around it. The ground fell silent. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he surveyed the scene. The leader was gone, its control over the swarm broken for good. The few remaining creatures were now nothing more than mindless, scattered husks, their once dominant forms reduced to nothing. "It's over," Lena said quietly, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, a feeling of relief washing over him. They had done it. They had stopped the leader. But at what cost? The city lay in ruins, a ghost town now. The destruction was unimaginable. The battle had taken everything from them. But as the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting a pale light over the shattered city, there was a flicker of hope. They had survived. They had fought back, against all odds. And though the world around them had been forever changed, they had earned their peace, for now. The apocalypse had not claimed them. It was their victory. The end.